Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the NRW. I'm your host, Rob Medina, and I thank you all very much for joining me here today because today I'm going to be reviewing the movie Frost. This movie actually came out earlier this month on October 11th, which you can rent it on Amazon. You can also buy it there as well, too. You can buy it on DVD and Blu-ray. And I can truthfully say that I really did enjoy the film. I didn't love the movie, but there were a lot of great qualities about the film that I truly did take away from my viewing experience of this film. And I've seen the movie so far twice. And each time I watched the film, there's actually a lot more things about the film that I've taken away from that I truly did enjoy. But one thing I'm going to highlight here real quickly is that this movie is actually directed by BrandonSlagle, who our very own Kuyapi had the opportunity to talk to here on the channel, where Brandon had got into details about what it took to make the movie, how the story came about, and then also talked about the ending as well too, which I won't reveal here because if there's one thing about this review that I'm going to be getting into is I'm not going to get into any spoilers. We'll focus on other aspects of it here too to hopefully entice you to want to check out the film. But the ending was one thing that Brandon had talked about. He said that it's going to either you're going to like it or you're going to hate it. And there's no in between. It's going to be a pretty divisive ending. So I was actually really intrigued with as far as what that ending was that made him say that it's going to be a very divisive film. And then even the star of the movie, DevannyPinn, who our own Kuyopi had also spoke with here on the channel, talked a little bit about the ending as well too, where this movie more or less was kind of inspired by true events that had occurred from an article that was sent out to her to kind of get a perspective of what the kind of film is going to be about and their approach to telling this narrative here. So I thought that with what I seen in this movie, there was a lot of great qualities about the storytelling that I really did truly enjoy about the film. Here's one thing I want to point out real quickly here too. I didn't realize before that I actually had seen a film that Brandon had directed from a while back called Escape from Empanada, if I recall correctly, that stars one of my favorite actors of all time and also a really good friend of Brandon and Louis Mandylor, where I remember when I saw the movie, because I only saw the film because of Louis, but when I saw the film for the first time, I think well over a year ago, I did not like the film very much. Not to say that the story was not good, because the story in itself for Escape from Empanada was actually quite good, but I felt like certain things that were executed in the story I didn't really appreciate all that much. Not saying that it sucked, that it was terrible. It just didn't click for me personally. So having recall seeing that film when I did a bit of a a little more research on his filmography for Brandon here, I was surprised that he had directed that movie, because when I saw that film and remember seeing Escape from Empanada, it was a night and day difference as far as the quality of the film, as far as the directing is concerned, that I thought had been improved a great deal from seeing that film and seeing this movie as well too. And then there was a trailer that came out earlier this month, I should say, for a movie called Battle of Saipion, I think they pronounce it, which stars again one of my favorite actors of all time in Louis Mandylor. And I saw the trailer and I was blown away with what I saw. And I'm really excited to see how that film's going to turn out, especially the fact knowing that Brandon had directed that movie too. And I remember I actually reached out to Louis and I told him, hey, I saw the trailer to this film. This looks awesome. I cannot wait to see it, because I do plan on checking out the film when it gets released next month and doing a review it as well too. And then again, having seen this movie and learning that Brent had directed that film, I'm very looking forward to see what he's going to do with that particular movie too, considering it's more or less kind of an action film set in World War II, if I recall correctly, or I can't remember the exact timing of. So if I'm wrong, I apologize here. But I'm really excited to see the future projects that Brandon has in line here, down the line here, including the fact that Devanny has also worked on several of his projects here, which also includes Battle Sapion, which I think looks really, really good. But I'm digressing here. But you understand where my level of anticipation is for Brandon's future work, including Devanny's as well too, considering what I've seen from this movie that I'm very much looking forward to here as well. So I will get into the plot synopsis, no spoilers. Of course, I get into my positives, my negatives, and then my rating. A young woman and her strained father fight to survive after being stranded on a remote mountainside during a winter storm. And that right there is the film in a nutshell. So now let's get into my positives. My first positive with this movie is with the actual overall story in itself, but really it's more pertaining to about the setup to certain events that occur in this film. So what I mean by that is this. There's a part of the movie where both the characters played by VernonWells and DevannyPinn leave their phones behind, and it's not a smart thing to do. I think nowadays to leave your phones behind, because you just never know when you might need it. So it's better to have it than not have it. But what I appreciate about the setup to that is that when you get to meet the characters for the first time and understand where their relationship was prior to the events of this film, and then where they are with it now and how they're trying to rekindle a relationship, which you get to see pretty much on the spot that although there was friction between them, they still were able to patch up whatever's left of the relationship, because you can tell they've had a good relationship, but a lot of the friction that had occurred between the two, daughter and, well, in this case, the daughter and father, mainly had to do with the father, because you find out he's still an alcoholic, he still drinks. A lot of it has to do with the fact and how his wife and her mother had passed away, and that was kind of more or less the downfall for a lot of things that occurred after that event there. So you get to see a lot of that backstory about how things have come the way they've done prior to the events of the film, and how they're trying to just rekindle whatever relationship is left, which there's plenty of. And you can clearly tell that they have a lot of love for each other and they respect each other. And they weren't necessarily at the happiest at the points of their lives in that particular part of the film. But once they were able to reestablish the relationship, you can clearly see that little by little, that things are starting to get really good for them, where the announcement of DeVanny's character being pregnant, who was also pregnant in real life in the production of this film, which they were able to infuse really effectively with the story, served well for the purpose of this film. And then along the way, you get to learn that Vernon's character is pretty much an old school guy. And there is a reason why he was very adamant about leave your phone behind, because the fact that you have your phone with you, and although he doesn't say it like that in many words, but that's pretty much the implication that you're understanding, that you have your phone with you, it's going to be a distraction. Your friends, the phone, they stay behind. It's just going to be you and I hanging out, being together, and enjoy our time together. And it made a lot of sense in setting that up, so that way when they do crash and they're stuck in the mountainside, isolated, no way out, why don't they have their phones? Well, because this had happened. So it made sense. Is it smart? No, but it made sense why it was handled that way for the effects of the story, which I thought it was done very, very well. And a lot of props to both Vernon and DeVanny, who have done a really good job when it came to acting off each other. Because if there's one thing that I was really actually liking, is the fact that I got to side with the characters, because there's really no villain in this movie at all. Although you can say the environment is kind of more or less the villain, but that's kind of by default. But the fact of the matter is that you have to make sure that you want to like the characters. And I think everyone in this film have done a good job in setting that up. But really, the actors in this movie have done a really good job in showing the chemistry, where you really do, at least in my opinion, believe that they are in fact father and daughter who are trying to reestablish a relationship. And then when they do, it actually is very believable and makes a lot of sense, because there was friction, but there was still a lot of love left over. And you can see that. And I think both DeVanny and Vernon have done a really good job in showcasing the vulnerabilities, the flaws, and yet having them be able to speak with each other on that, to try to meet in the middle and getting that established. So that way, when the events that occur where they crash, you want to side with the characters and want to survive with a really good outcome at the end of the film. So I think a lot of props has to go to them in that respect, because I think they both done a really good job in establishing that pretty early on in the film. So that way, when the events occur after the fact, you want to make sure that they are alive at the end of the day. Another thing I want to point out too is with the director and BrandonSlagle, because I mentioned before in the intro that he had done a film called Escape from Empanada, which I wasn't a really big fan of. Not to say that the story was not any good, because it was actually a really good story. There was a lot of great qualities about the film that I did enjoy, but I remember, because I've only seen the movie once, there was a lot more negatives than there were positive. And one of the negatives for me that stuck out for me the most, quite frankly, had to do with the directing of the film, which I wasn't really connecting with at all. Seeing this movie, you can tell he's gotten a lot better. And I think he does a really good job in just establishing the environment and setting up the environment for the characters that they're in, for you to be able to feel the tension that's rising for what's to come along the way here. Because again, there's no villain in this movie, but the environment is something that you have to be very aware of here, as being a very serious danger for these two characters, and also allowing the time for you as the audience to be able to connect with the characters. At least that's how I felt about it, because I think he did a really good job in setting that up and establishing that. And everyone else involved as well to have done a really good job in allowing certain things to occur, to be able to let the events sink in when it progresses along the way with this particular narrative, I meant to say. So I got to give a lot of props to Brandon, because having seen what he'd done with this movie, I think he's gotten a lot better in terms of directing that I've seen from Escape from Empanada and having seen this movie. And I cannot wait to see what he's going to be doing moving forward, because after seeing this film, I I think he's gotten a lot better. And there's only so much more he can do. I think that this movie is able to show you more or less kind of like the tip of the iceberg, where he can do a lot bigger and better stuff, and showcasing what he's able to do on a small scale here and still tell an effective and really wide scale story. Because again, even though this movie is a low budget film, I never felt that way about the movie at all. In fact, I actually felt like this movie has done a lot of things that a lot of films in a higher budget quality, as far as storytelling is concerned with the characters, they've done very successful here in this movie. So a lot of props to Brandon, everyone else involved, because I think they've done a good job in establishing that, even though I've said that a million times, but I mean that when I say that, because that's something that I think really worked very well in this movie, in just getting that connection with the characters and the overall story here. So as far as everything else is concerned, I'm going to point out about the ending of this movie, which again, I'm not going to reveal what it is, but the ending to this film, I was really intrigued with the story, because Brandon and Devanny had talked about how this ending is going to be loved or hated. And in fact, someone that I am pretty acquainted with here, and Gary Kearns, had posted on social media about having seen the film, and he just was blown away with the ending. Like that ending, had, I wouldn't say got him, but I think he said something to the effect of like, it was surprising, more or less, if I recall correctly. So having read Gary's post on social media about what he felt about the film, especially with that ending, I was like, I definitely got to check this movie out to see what it was about this ending that's so divisive with a lot of people, where either you love it or you hate it. I didn't hate the ending at all. In fact, I actually liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. But I will point out too that something occurs in the film along the way that made me realize what could happen at the end of the movie, and is exactly what I expected it. Was it executed well? Yes, I actually think it was. In fact, I think it was handled quite well, but because I kind of figured out what was going on, I wasn't shocked by it at all. Although I think some people who will see the movie would be shocked with the ending. Not to say that I'm tooting my own horn here, but even though I figured it out, I still enjoyed it. So that's going to be the end of my positives. So now let's get into my negatives. The only real main negative that I have with the movie is with how, what's the best way I could say here without really ruining here for anybody who hasn't seen the film, but how Vernon's character was handled when it came to certain parts of the film, especially towards, I wouldn't say the end, but close to that. There was something about the way that particular side of the story with that particular character that I actually wanted more out of, where you've got this great setup between the daughter and the father, and then somewhere along the way, I felt like it started to, I wouldn't say going downhill, but the best way I could describe it is that there was a great setup, but there was no proper closure as far as what had happened to that character, without revealing anything here about what occurred to him. And I felt like that was actually something that was missing, because you do get that with Devanny's character in this film. And that's what I wanted for Vernon's character in the movie too, where Devanny's character is obviously the focus, but you get more or less a proper closure with her. Whereas Vernon's character, on the other hand, you do get one, but I just felt like it just wasn't handled as well as her character. So I think that was something that really stuck out for me, that I didn't think clicked for me all the way through. Not to say that I didn't like the way it was handled. It just wasn't handled as well as I think it could have been handled. But I'm sure a lot of it simply had to do with timing, because the movie didn't have a large production time here. I think they shot the movie in a little over a week, if I recall correctly. So maybe some of it had to do with that as well too, with Vernon's schedule, among other things as well. So I think with what they were able to pull off in this movie, still worked, but I just wanted more out of it. I think another thing that comes to mind that I think could stick out for me that didn't necessarily click for me all that well. Well, I don't know if it's a fair criticism here, because I felt like the crash sequences didn't really work for me. And when it came to when the characters are crashing through the woods, how that was handled, I remember thinking like, oh, it could have been done better. But again, I think a lot of it simply had to do with just budget, timing, and resources. And considering after seeing the movie a second time around, what I saw, honestly, I thought it was handled quite well. If that's, obviously that's the case here, but because that was my initial criticism, but when I saw it again, I was like, you know what? It really wasn't that bad. So I don't know if there's anything else I can point out in the negative here without getting to spoilers here, but again, I liked the film a great deal. I didn't love the movie because I felt like there's certain elements of the film that worked very well when it came to the setup, just the way that it was handled in terms of the closure of certain parts of the story. It just didn't really click for me all the way through. But there are still great qualities to the film that I did thoroughly enjoy, that when I went back to revisit the second time around, I actually enjoyed it a lot more. So, I guess that's the best way I can close out my negative. So now let's get into my rating. I did enjoy the film. As I mentioned before, didn't love it, but I really did enjoy the film a great deal. And I think this is a movie that if people really do take the time to watch the film and really see what everyone involved with this project were able to pull off here with the limited resources, because I've talked to enough filmmakers and actors, writers, and so on that make low budget films. And in some ways, some of the low budget films are far superior in terms of storytelling, in production value, in pacing, among other things as well too, that a lot of big studio films don't necessarily do all that well for a variety of different reasons. But even though I didn't love the movie, there's still great qualities about this film that I thoroughly did enjoy that really stuck out for me in terms of what they were able to pull off with the limited resources they have and the amount of time that they had, because we still got a good film and I still got a movie that I did enjoy a great deal. So for me, I'm going to say this movie is a raise the glass. And those are my thoughts on the film. If you have seen the movie, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. And I'll also be sure to put a link in the description below for you guys to check out the film where you can rent it and buy it on Amazon, which I highly recommend you guys do so. Because even though I didn't love the film, I still found a great amount of quality this movie was able to offer here. And seeing independent filmmakers doing their absolute best to make a great quality film, whether I like the execution of it or not, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's really about how well they were able to pull off with what they were given. And they've done a really good job in this particular case here with Frost in telling a good, effective story that I thoroughly did enjoy. So I hope you guys will enjoy it as well too. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. And also, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the NRW. Make sure you share and like the videos, hit the notification bell while you're down there, and follow NRW on social media on Instagram, New Release Wednesdays, on Facebook, Nerds Rule the World, and on Twitter at the NRW. And you can follow me on my social media accounts on Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and I have social media for the show as well. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. I hope you guys enjoy this review, and until next, everybody, stay safe out there, and cheers.